Today I take a look at a movie that shouldn't have been made. Hello and welcome to a Rotted Review of the Day, and today is Mike's Pick Monday, and my pick for today is The Possession of Hannah Grace, made in 2018. I knew absolutely nothing about this movie when I picked it, other than the poster looked pretty cool. It was kind of getting some half-hearted reviews, some good, some bad, and wanted my own take on it and dove right in. And ultimately what I found, well, straight out of the gate, from a 5-mile conceptual overview, is a very, very similar movie to The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which was an exceptional film, in my opinion. It worked on almost every level. And having watched The Possession of Hannah Grace now, what I can say is that on every level that The Autopsy of Jane Doe worked, this one did not. My review of this one, I'm going to go ahead and throw the scores up all at once. Each category is worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And I'm going to somewhat unapologetically rail on this movie. Just a heads up on this one, because it honestly ticks a lot of grievances I have with modern high-budget horror films. And this is my opportunity to kind of vent a bit. This movie followed the character of Megan Reed, who is a new medical examiner or assistant medical examiner working a graveyard shift at an improbably creepy city morgue. And she receives the body of a young girl that had died, and in the processing of her, things start going wonky in the settings and the surroundings, indicating some sort of possession. Very, very similar to, well, that would be the 5-mile overview of The Autopsy of Jane Doe. A young woman comes in, medical examiner's office. As they start investigating, strange things start happening to the settings, and so on from there. Now, Megan has her own demons that she's been dealing with. She used to be a cop. She had an accident or failed to act and then started getting into a drug habit, which has now led her to be where she is now. But really, I think one of the bigger problems that I had with this one was the character of Megan and how fairly nondescript she was. If you pull back from a character, I remember watching this on a Red Letter Media review of The Phantom Menace, I believe it was, and they were comparing Queen Amidala to Han Solo, and they were asking people if you could describe the characters without saying what they look like and what actions they took in the film. And the more that they could describe them, the better the character was written. And not to necessarily continue comparing this movie with The Autopsy of Jane Doe, but I think it's an apt comparison considering there was almost a carbon copy in concept. And those characters there, the father-son team, were well fleshed out. They were detailed and they were nuanced. And the Megan Reed character just wasn't. For trying to drive this movie as a main character, it just really didn't work for me. But more than that, getting down to the nitty-gritty of why I really think this movie failed, there's just a number of things. First of all, everything about this really seemed to set up as a gimmick. The setting itself, like I said, improbably creepy, ceilings that are 24 feet high and concrete. And if you look at an actual medical examiner's office, it looks like a fairly plain hospital room, just with a lot of stainless steel sinks and stainless steel beds. It was so bizarre, the setting there. And then they threw in this thing with automated lights to conserve energy, I'm assuming. But the graveyard shift, it's not just lights that'll turn off if you're idle in the room for 10 minutes. It will follow you around so that wherever you're looking, even though you're lit, the hallway that you just walked through, if you look back, nice and dark. The loading dock that she couldn't leave, the security guard that popped up, everything about this movie seemed to set itself up as, look what kind of horror gimmick we can throw at this film. And it just didn't work on that level. For me, horror films work best when the horror element of it is the setting, not the driving force. when you have characters that are exploring their story, their character stories, using the horror elements of the film as the background, as the catalyst that gets things moving, to tell a good character story with relatable settings so that you can get drawn into the place and drawn into the characters and form an emotional attachment with the place and the people, and you can get the sense of their story as it unfolds using the demon or the vampire or whatever of the horror aspect to challenge the characters in ways that non-horror films can't, then I think that's a big success. But this movie didn't do that. This movie was simply, let's throw as many tropes as we can at this to try and have as many jump scares as we can have at this, while having as many nondescript characters and milquetoast settings as we possibly can to have a high-budget horror film with no mystery and no development. And that's pretty much all I really have to say about this one. From the acting standpoint, I thought it was an okay job. Nothing really exceptional. Shay Mitchell, do I criticize her performance as Megan when I think it was written poorly in the first place? That's a little tough to do. But even so, she really didn't bring a whole lot to the table here. I honestly think the strongest performance here was of Kirby Johnson as Hannah Grace, who was animated, as in mobile, not as in drawn, but mobile within this film for only a few minutes at a time. And but I still think that her body performance was the strongest aspect of this film, but that's really not enough to drive this. It's certainly not enough to make it scary, and it's not enough to make it interesting. So that is my review of 2018's The Possession of Hannah Grace. I really thank you for joining me here today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.